with this standing threat that, yeah, because you passed an Exploration Act, therefore Trump will withhold funding to South Africa. And I said, let's not mobilize Africa. Let's withhold minerals to US. That is it. If they don't give us money, let's not give them minerals. But the reality is they take our minerals, but say why we're withdrawing funding. No, we have minerals in the continent. And therefore we have something that we have. We're not just beggars, but we must just use that endowment for our benefit as a continent. But if as a continent we are frightened, we fear everything, we are going to collapse, and will collapse with minerals at our doorstep. So my appeal is that Africa is the world's richest mining jurisdiction. And that issue is an issue that we must internalize as a continent, use it to our advantage. It's one of the things that we can use to compete in the world. We can't be the poorest continent.
Well, let's get the latest now from New York correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Sherwin, a very good afternoon to you. Strong words there by Minister Mantashe. A lot of reaction since that social media post by President Trump, Sherwin. So as we continue then to get the latest on this matter, perhaps let's revisit what Donald Trump said in that post. Just break it down for us.
And just before I do that, Inati, perhaps also just to take a step back and understand that South Africa has now been included in the Trump vortex, right? But it is not exceptional in that sense. He's not only targeting South Africa in terms of his Truth Social posts. We enter the fray in the context where Trump has been attacking partners like Canada and Mexico. Panama, in terms of the Panama Canal, has put the European Union on notice in terms of likely tariffs that will be imposed there. He has placed tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico in just the last number of days. So we now enter the fray in a context where he is picking fights with a lot of countries, in the main, American allies. And I think what you heard initially from Donald Trump in that Truth Social post, which caught everybody off guard, was that South Africa is, quote, confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. It's a bad situation that the radical left media doesn't want to talk about. He talked about human rights violations, and at a minimum, this is happening for all to see. The United States won't stand for it. We will act. I will also be cutting off all future funding to South Africa until a full investigation of this situation has been completed. Unati, I just got off a phone call with South Africa's ambassador to Washington, Ibrahim Rasool. We'll actually be talking to him on the record in the next hour. And he said this: Trump is firing warning shots on South Africa in terms of land expropriation, using land expropriation as a pretext for other things. He didn't get too specific about what the other things might be, but we can certainly surmise. He says this warning shot gives us the opportunity to engage and to deal with the land expropriation issue. While we are not desperate in terms of aid, we owe a process of engagement. Given the status between the two countries as strategic partners, we'll put the facts on the table. But I think the broad takeaway here is that Trump is again shooting from the hip. The facts might not be on his side here, but the damage that has been done in terms of how the South African government has now sought to respond, but also the impact on the economy, the impact on the concern that raises. You know, we had a statement from the South African Chamber of Commerce here in the United States expressing concern about the economic impact, particularly in terms of South Africa's economic growth prospects and job losses. They raise concern in particular about South Africa's re-inclusion in a renegotiated and reformulated AGOA, which will come up for renewal in September this year. An act of Congress will renew that certainly for the foreseeable future. And growing concern within this broader context that South Africa certainly has an uphill battle to face in terms of being re-included in that the African Growth and Opportunity Act, Unati.
And let's just continue to talk about, South Africa's position. I mean, it is adamant that it will continue to engage the Trump administration to address and, of course, affirm its policy, especially on the Expropriation Act. Perhaps, Sherwin, let's unpack then what the implications are on a broader scale in terms of US-South Africa relations. You've mentioned, of course, AGOA that goes for renewal in September. Of course, all eyes on that. But also, there are supposed to be a number of engagements between South Africa and the US as South Africa has a G20 presidency, and it will be handing over to the US at some time. And as we speak, we understand, of course, that the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, is in Washington, D.C. meeting with Trump. So one wonders then what will come out of that conversation that will again put South Africa in its orbit, to use your word.
It's an excellent point. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, will be one of the first foreign leaders to visit Donald Trump's White House. He's expected there tomorrow on Tuesday. And it should be lost on no one that he has the ear, Benjamin Netanyahu has the ear of President Trump, and has very likely raised issues about the crosshairs that Israel has faced in terms of its relationship with South Africa. South Africa spearheading that genocide case at the International Court of Justice, welcoming the International Criminal Court's indictments of Netanyahu and his former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. And certainly, the influence of Elon Musk here must not be underestimated. You have seen him directly attack President Ramaphosa. Ramaphosa, of course, putting out that statement earlier. Elon Musk then retweeting the statement with the words, quote, why have you openly racist ownership laws? Vincent Magwenya then responding, my brother, you would know that owing to a devastating legacy of centuries of oppressive and brutal colonialization and apartheid, our constitution provides for redressing the ills of the past. You have his number. We started a dialogue. Of course, they started that dialogue during the high-level week here at the at the United Nations General Assembly in September last year. They had a private meeting. And so let's continue talking constructively. And so, in a sense, South Africa having to chase its tail here, having to correct the misrepresentation of facts in terms of the expropriation bill. But sometimes, focusing on what it seems to be the case might not actually be addressing what the broader concerns are. And it should not be lost on anybody watching and following this that there has been an issue of dispute between the United States under the Biden administration. In terms of South Africa's foreign policy positions, we've seen Republican lawmakers in the main try to re-evaluate and re-examine the bilateral relationship between South Africa, citing national security concerns in terms of South Africa's positions, particularly in regard to the Ukraine-Russia war. And so this is much broader than perhaps expropriation of land here. And I think what this has done is it gives the United States an opportunity to bark at South Africa. The question really is it only about this? Or was it much more? And I think the takeaway should be that there are many, many fronts here that South Africa has had to engage the United States with. Vincent Magwenya in that response said it's not about trade. It's very much about trade, because the penalty here could be that South Africa would be excluded from AGOA, and that will have some huge financial implications on jobs in South Africa and the economy writ large.
I think they were remaining very optimistic there, Sherwin. But thank you so much for that update, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC's New York correspondent there for us.